Before we dive into the electrifying showdown that captivated a nation, prepare yourselves for a journey into the heart of a cultural earthquake. This isn't just a story, it's a testament to defiance, a masterclass in reclaiming one's voice, and a stark reminder that sometimes the most powerful statements are made by those who refuse to sit down. If you're ready to witness a moment that flipped the script on power and perception, hit that subscribe button, give this video a massive thumbs up, and drop your thoughts in the comments below, because what you're about to hear is just the beginning. The email landed in Karoline Leavitt's inbox like a rogue comet, streaking across the predictable firmament of her post-speaking tour routine. For months, she had crisscrossed the nation, her voice a clarion call on conservative media circuits, known less for polite diplomacy and more for an unapologetic fire that scorched polite convention. She was a rising star, a formidable presence, yet the mainstream still clung to a narrative that dismissed her as too young to take seriously. This perception, a subtle yet persistent hum beneath every accolade, was a challenge she met with a steely resolve, turning perceived weakness into an unexpected strength. But even Karoline, with her ironclad composure, blinked at the sender. National Cultural Summit, keynote debate panel featuring Denzel Washington, Karoline Leavitt, Dr. Maya Grant, and more. Denzel Washington. The name alone resonated with the weight of legend, an actor whose every role was a masterclass in gravitas, whose opinions carried the thrum of undeniable authority. What could he possibly gain from sharing a stage with someone the media still stubbornly labeled as a political ingenue? At first, she dismissed it as a prank, a misdirected invitation, a glitch in the digital matrix, but then a follow-up call confirmed it. It was no mistake, and Karoline Leavitt, true to her nature, didn't hesitate. The event was being meticulously billed as a high-level dialogue, a cross-pollination of minds at the intersection of culture, politics, and generational identity. It wasn't just a niche panel, it was a spectacle. Streamed live to millions, with full national press coverage guaranteed, it promised to be a defining moment in the ongoing cultural conversation. For Denzel, it was another platform to impart wisdom. For the other panelists, a chance to contribute to a weighty discourse. But for Karoline, it was something far more profound, a proving ground. It was an arena where she could finally dismantle the too young label, where her voice, honed in countless debates and interviews, would be tested on the grandest stage. This wasn't merely about winning an argument. It was about proving her right to be heard, to be seen, to be taken seriously. She arrived at the sprawling venue early, the cavernous auditorium already buzzing with a palpable current of anticipation. Posters plastered outside proclaimed the event as a clash of egos, a deliberate nod to the ideological fault lines that ran through the expected participants. The air was thick with a mixture of excitement and partisan tension. Some attendees were undeniably there for Denzel, drawn by the magnetic pull of his iconic presence. Others, however, had arrived with a different agenda, their faces etched, clearly there to boo Karoline, to witness what they hoped would be her public unraveling. But regardless of their allegiance, one thing was certain: they were watching. Every eye, every camera, every digital feed was poised, ready to capture the unfolding drama. The stage was set, the players were gathering, and the quiet hum of the crowd was merely the overture to a confrontation that would soon echo far beyond the walls of that buzzing auditorium. The backstage area, usually a whirlwind of last-minute preparations and nervous energy, was thick with a different kind of tension, a quiet hum of anticipation, like the air before a storm. Handlers whispered into earpieces, production assistants scurried, but the speakers themselves moved with a practiced calm, each a master of their own stage. Then Denzel arrived. He wasn't loud, didn't demand attention, but his presence was a gravitational force. He greeted the other speakers with his trademark poise, a nod here, a brief warm smile there, radiating an almost regal confidence that had captivated audiences for decades. When he reached Karoline Leavitt, the air seemed to crackle. He extended his hand, his grip firm, his eyes holding a polite but undeniably measured assessment. "You're younger than I expected," he said, a slight, almost charming smile playing on his lips, a smile that suggested a gentle, paternal amusement.
It was a line designed to disarm, to subtly assert a seniority that went beyond mere age. But Karoline Leavitt was not one to be disarmed. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, met his. "And you're taller than I expected," she shot back, her voice cool, clear, and utterly devoid of deference. The tension, already palpable, became instant and mutual. It was a verbal parry, a clear signal that this young woman would not be easily categorized, nor would she be intimidated. Moments later, they were on stage, bathed in the blinding glare of the studio lights, the roar of the crowd a distant echo. The moderator, a seasoned professional, welcomed the audience, framing the event as a crucial cross-generational conversation about America's future. The initial exchanges were civil, a dance of carefully articulated viewpoints, each speaker laying out their perspective on culture's role in society. But beneath the veneer of polite discourse, a different narrative was brewing, a confrontation waiting for its spark. That spark ignited when Karoline Leavitt with surgical precision challenged Hollywood's pervasive role in shaping political narratives. She spoke of entertainment's growing, undeniable alignment with partisan ideology, presenting her arguments with a clarity that cut through the usual platitudes. Denzel, who had been listening with a detached, almost amused air, suddenly leaned forward, his eyebrows raising in a subtle shift of expression. He reached for his microphone, his voice resonating with that familiar, powerful timbre. "Let me stop you right there," he began, his tone laced with a condescension that was all the more potent for its smooth delivery. "With all due respect, little lady, you don't yet understand the power of art. You're playing in a pool you've barely stepped into." The room shifted. A ripple of laughter, nervous and uncertain, spread through parts of the audience. It was a classic Denzel move, a dismissive quip delivered with such authority that it was meant to end the discussion, to put the little lady firmly in her place. But Karoline Leavitt was not a character in his script. Her eyes narrowed, not out of offense, but out of calculation. She held her gaze, allowing the laughter to subside, waiting for the moderator to make a futile attempt to regain control. Then, with a calm that belied the fire in her eyes, she smiled. It was not a smile of amusement, but of absolute, unyielding resolve. She leaned into her own microphone, her voice cutting through the lingering tension, clear and precise, echoing across the live stream, across the nation. "Did you just call me little lady on national television?" The crowd stilled. Even Denzel, the master of the stage, visibly blinked. "That's cute," she continued, her voice gaining a quiet, formidable power. "I was going to talk about media influence, but now we're going to talk about condescension. And what it means when a man with Hollywood power tries to silence a woman with a voice, just because he's uncomfortable with her facts."
The silence that followed Karoline's cutting question was not empty. It was pregnant with shock, then swiftly with an explosive release. Gasps rippled through the auditorium, quickly followed by a scattering of applause that rapidly swelled into a thunderous ovation. Phones, already poised, shot into the air, capturing every flicker of expression, every subtle shift on the stage. Tweets flew, comments exploded across live streams, and within seconds, the carefully orchestrated debate had shattered, giving way to the raw, unpredictable energy of a true confrontation. The real debate, the one no one had anticipated, had just begun, and Karoline Leavitt, with her calm ferocity, was not backing down. The moderator's face, usually a picture of composed professionalism, tightened into a diplomatic smile that barely masked his alarm. He clearly hadn't expected this kind of heat, this level of immediate, unscripted combustion so early in the discussion. But it was too late. The energy in the room had irrevocably shifted. The cameras, sensing the seismic change, zoomed in, their lenses hungry for every nuance of the unfolding drama. The livestream comments, a torrent of digital reactions, exploded with a fervor that mirrored the gasps and cheers in the hall. Denzel, the seasoned performer, adjusted his microphone, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, and leaned back slightly in his chair, a calculated attempt to recover the room's rhythm, to reassert control over a narrative that had suddenly spun wildly off his script. "Look," he began, a slight, almost disarming laugh accompanying his words. "I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I just think perspective matters, and with age comes experience.
It was the classic elder statesman's play, a gentle reminder of hierarchy, a soft-pedaled retreat designed to regain the moral high ground. But Karoline Leavitt didn't miss a beat. Her voice, cool but firm, cut through his attempt to deflect. "And with age, sometimes comes arrogance," she replied, her words landing with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "You may have experience, Mr. Washington, but that doesn't make your opinion more valid than the millions of young Americans who are told to sit down, shut up, and wait their turn." The audience, no longer passive observers, leaned forward in their seats. Even those who had come solely for Denzel were now listening to Karoline, captivated by her unwavering resolve. She wasn't cracking under the pressure. She was rising, her conviction burning brighter with every word. Denzel, momentarily thrown, lifted his hands in a performative shrug, a gesture of mock surrender. "So you're saying young people know more than the people who built the system?" he challenged, attempting to frame her as naive. Karoline turned towards him, her movement deliberate, purposeful. "I'm saying young people see the cracks in the system," she stated with an undeniable truth, "because they weren't the ones who poured the cement." That line hit hard. A visible ripple ran through the entire panel. Even Dr. Maya Grant, seated between them, visibly flinched. She tried to steer the conversation back to the original safer theme of shared values in a divided culture. But it was futile. This wasn't just a panel anymore. It was a generational showdown, one that had burst wide open on live television. Denzel, clearly unaccustomed to being publicly checked, tried to regain his footing, attempting to dismiss Karoline's stance as reactionary and fueled by social media attention. Karoline responded without blinking, her gaze locked onto him. "You've played heroes on screen, sir. I've stood for truth off-screen. There's a difference." Gasps again, followed by a few in the crowd beginning to clap, a defiant rhythm joining the fray. The moderator interjected, but neither combatant was backing off. And then came the turning point. With a deliberate, almost theatrical movement, Karoline pulled a printed quote from her folder, a real one, from a previous interview where Denzel himself had once said, "Don't confuse movement with progress." She held it up, looking directly at him, her eyes piercing. "You once said, people run in circles thinking they're getting somewhere. But the truth is, some of us were never invited to run. We had to break the circle. That's what I'm doing here. I'm not playing a role. I'm breaking one." The crowd erupted. What had started as a dismissive remark, "Sit down, little lady," was now backfiring live, reshaped into a defining moment of defiance and clarity. For Karoline, it was only the beginning. The segment ended with the moderator thanking the panelists through a strange, strained smile, barely masking the chaos that had just unfolded. As the applause waned, Karoline stood up, collected her notes, and offered a brief, polite nod towards the crowd. She didn't look at Denzel. She didn't need to, because the real show wasn't over. It was just migrating online. Within minutes, the moment had gone viral. Clips of Denzel saying "little lady" were already circulating with captions like, "He didn't see this clapback coming," and "Karoline Leavitt just schooled Denzel on live TV." On social media, conservative commentators praised her as fearless and sharp. Liberal voices were divided. Some defended Denzel, others admitted he had underestimated her. Even late-night hosts hinted they'd be talking about the exchange. The battle had moved from the stage to the digital arena, and Karoline was already winning.
Karoline sat quietly in the green room, the lingering applause from the stage a fading echo. Her phone, however, was a vibrating portal to chaos. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. Her mind was already calculating the next move. Her team rushed in, a flurry of hushed whispers about media requests, podcast invites, cable news panels. This wasn't just a moment. It was a momentum shift, a tectonic plate shifting beneath the cultural landscape. Meanwhile, in the VIP lounge, Denzel remained, surrounded by handlers whose usual confidence had evaporated. His charisma, normally an impenetrable shield, had taken a direct hit, not from scandal, but from exposure. A young staffer approached him, voice barely a whisper. "Twitter's, not being kind right now." Denzel exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. He wasn't angry at the backlash. He was stunned. For the first time in a long while, the script hadn't gone his way. Karoline wasn't a movie character he could control with timing and tone. She was a wild card, and now she had a microphone and a following. That night, every major network ran some version of the headline. "Hollywood meets its match." One columnist wrote, This wasn't just about age or gender. It was about who gets to speak and who gets told to sit down. Karoline Leavitt didn't just refuse the seat, she flipped the table. For Karoline, the dust hadn't even settled, and already the ground beneath the conversation had shifted. She wasn't the little lady anymore, she was the one everyone was watching. By the next morning, Karoline's inbox was a battlefield. Some messages brimmed with praise, others dripped with disdain. She knew that going viral meant instant exposure, but also instant enemies, and that was fine with her. She hadn't built her career to be liked, she built it to be heard. She stepped into her office early, coffee in hand, scrolling through mentions. The trending hashtag wasn't subtle. Hashtag, sit down little lady. Originally meant to mock her, it was now being flipped, reclaimed, and weaponized. Memes flooded the internet. Karoline photoshopped onto famous movie scenes with captions like, she didn't sit, she stood. One popular tweet read, you don't tell a woman to sit down unless you're afraid of what she'll say standing up. Meanwhile, Denzel's team was in full damage control. An early interview he gave tried to brush it off. It was just a figure of speech. I respect her courage to show up. But for many, it was too little, too late. The phrase had landed wrong, and the tone had carried weight. This wasn't just about political ideology. It was about power, tone, and entitlement. Later that afternoon, Karoline sat down with a well-known conservative podcast host. The episode was titled, I Stood and I Spoke. During the interview, she pulled no punches. What bothered me most wasn't the phrase, it was the assumption behind it. That being young means you haven't earned a voice. That being direct makes you a brat. That being female makes you disposable. I've heard all those things before. He just put them in a sentence. The clip hit over 1 million views in hours. Just like that, she wasn't just the girl from the debate anymore. She was the woman who had stared down a cultural icon and refused to flinch. Meanwhile, Denzel's camp debated whether he should release a formal apology. If you apologize, you legitimize her position, one advisor cautioned. If you don't, you'll keep bleeding online, another countered. He chose silence. But silence in the digital age doesn't stop the noise. That week, Karoline was invited onto every major outlet, some to grill her, some to celebrate her, but all of them recognized one thing. She had shifted the balance, not with a slogan, not with a campaign, but with one moment, one sentence, and one refusal to stay quiet. And somewhere in the background, Denzel watched and learned a hard truth. Sometimes, the real script gets written by the person you tried to silence.
3 days had passed, and the echo of Karoline's words still hadn't faded. Cable news panels continued to replay the exchange, dissecting tone, intent, and cultural impact as if it were a State of the Union address. But behind the scenes, a shift was brewing, one that Karoline expected. When you speak too boldly, someone always tries to shut the mic off. On the 4th morning, her communications director rushed into her office, face pale. "There's a letter from the Diversity Council," she stammered. Karoline raised an eyebrow. "A letter? They're calling for your speaking engagements to be canceled, citing divisive conduct and age-inappropriate rhetoric. They claim you created a hostile environment for Denzel." Karoline blinked, then laughed once, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "So now standing up for myself is hostile?" The irony was almost laughable. The very people who preached inclusion and free expression were trying to deplatform her because she refused to play the obedient underdog. But Karoline didn't panic. She prepared. Within hours, she recorded a sharp, polished response, not from anger, but from absolute clarity. In front of a crisp backdrop flanked by 2 American flags, she stared into the camera. "I didn't insult anyone. I didn't scream, protest, or walk out. I simply refuse to be dismissed. If that threatens someone's comfort, maybe it's their comfort that needs inspection, not my voice." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. You don't get to silence a woman just because she didn't clap for the narrative. The video racked up 3.7 million views in 12 hours. Support poured in, not just from conservatives, but from unexpected voices. Gen Z influencers, moderate feminists, even a few progressive writers who admitted off-record that Denzel had crossed a line. Meanwhile, Denzel's publicist issued a vague statement about mutual respect and misunderstood tone, but the damage was done.
Every attempt to paint Karoline as immature or reactive only highlighted the truth. She had been calm, articulate, and unapologetically strong, and she wasn't backing down. That night, she took the stage at a youth summit, an event scheduled long before the debate, now transformed into something electric. The crowd rose before she even spoke. She stood at the podium, eyes sharp, radiating an almost palpable power. They told me to sit down. I stood. They tried to cancel me. I showed up louder. Let me be clear, if they think this ends with a hashtag, they haven't met me yet. Thunderous applause erupted. Karoline wasn't just surviving the moment, she was owning it. And every day the story stayed alive, it shifted from debate drama to something more dangerous for her critics: momentum.